World Vision. Joining me on the program now, Associate National Director TJ Grant. TJ, kia ora, Merry Christmas.
Hey, kia ora, Merry Christmas to you and all the listeners. Great to be on the call with you.
When it comes to, I suppose, people in desperate circumstances, people that are refugees who are desperate to get the resources that they need to care for their family. Now, all of us want to do what we can to bless our families at Christmas time, but
Mm.
there's people in some pretty tough places around the world for whom there's some extra challenges, right?
Yeah, that's definitely true. And if people would have been seeing the news, obviously the latest was Syria. And while we're hopeful there, it's a country that, for 14 years has been racked with conflict and violence, and the humanitarian needs there are really significant. And as World Vision, we are and have been responding there to uh, visits and places I've seen recently, from Somalia to Uganda to refugee camps in Bangladesh. And so Christmas definitely does look different in different places. But just connecting that, I think, with Christmas here in New Zealand, and a great story was thinking about that I was hoping to share with you, just around a special Christmas memory I have of giving and receiving, if that piques your interest to be
Yeah,
able to share a little bit.
sounds good. Let's go Christmas past on this one, TJ.
Yeah, sure, sure. Well, a Christmas I remember is a Christmas actually that started me on this work many, many years ago, over 20 years ago in Taiwan. And I'll tell you the story briefly, and it'll bring it to life here in terms of giving and receiving. My wife and I had just got married. We were in our early 20s. We'd moved to Taiwan from Canada to teach English and pay off student loans and just have an adventure.
Yeah.
Well, we're there for a couple months having a great adventure, and we realized though that something was missing.
Mm.
We were missing something in terms of what we were doing. Well, it was fun. There was just a little bit of a hole in terms of meaning or purpose.
Yeah.
So one evening we prayed a prayer. We said, God, if you will open a door for us here to help out to volunteer, then we will walk through it. Well, the very next day, Andrew, we were tutoring English at a doctor's house. They had a lovely Filipino maid we'd never met before and had a great conversation. And she picked something up in our chat, and she gave us a piece of paper with a name and two names and a phone number on it. And she said, "You have to call these people." So these people were Ted and Bev Skiles, Christian missionaries who'd moved to Taiwan 30 years before, and they had opened this orphanage. And they'd open this orphanage for street kids, abandoned kids, talk about refugees or
Yeah.
people without a home or family. And they built this amazing, they called it the Home of God's Love,
Mm.
place for kind of abandoned or street children. And we're taking care of them. And at the same time, there would be babies that would kind of be left on their doorstep, and they would look them to get adopted with a loving home.
Yeah.
So what worked out, Andrew, was every Thursday evening, my wife and I would go to this orphanage and take care of the babies.
Wow.
And Ted and Bev, for the first time in a decade, would go on a date into the town.
Mm.
And we started doing this, and we started taking care of the babies. And at first, I felt good about myself. And anybody
Yep.
who gives, anybody who's inspired by what you guys are doing, you should feel good. It's a great thing. You're helping somebody else. But you know what? Something changed over 2 years of doing that, from me just feeling good about it or volunteering as a young man to this realization one evening, looking down at this little baby, that these Thursday evenings with the babies had become the most important part of my week, the
Yeah.
most important thing I was doing in Taiwan. And I thought, why?
Mm.
What has happened or shifted? And obviously the spirit had moved in me. I look back on those experiences as kind of the starting point for my career and the work that I do. But what I realized and what I can see is, at first I thought maybe it's because God's sharing a little bit of the love of Jesus through me with this little one. That God's doing this special thing, that it's
Yeah.
me giving a little of myself outside of myself, and that is, you know, having some kind of spiritual impact, because the baby's never going to remember my name,
Yep.
know who I was, but I was there. What I realize now, the gift that I received on those Thursday evenings wasn't just me sharing the love of God or Jesus with those little ones.
Mm-hmm.
They were sharing the love of God and Jesus with me.
Wow.
I was experiencing the love of God by stepping out of myself and interacting with these little babies. Matthew 25, your listeners will know, Jesus says, "Whatever you did for the least of these brothers or sisters of mine, you did for me."
Mm.
When I was hungry, you fed me. When I was in prison, you visited me. Orphaned or widowed, took care of me, or you saw me. And so I just link that with what's happening in Syria. I link that with the amazing work that World Vision is doing, and is only able to do because of Kiwis like your listeners who support us and make that possible. And I just link that with the amazing privilege I've had over all these years to do this work, and how when we give, it's an amazing thing. When we give of ourselves a little bit, God can move through that and do some very practical, tangible things, which I'd love to talk about, but also some spiritual things. But what's amazing is that, and I'll kind of conclude this part with this thought, is that when we see the divine spark in someone else, and when we touch that and honor that, you know what? Our light and our lives shine brighter too.
That is so good. TJ, thank you so much for sharing that story. If we focus on Syria, I mean, there'll be people watching this at the moment and said, hey, I've seen the news. Everyone's happy. The war is over. Surely they don't need as much help now as they used to. Having said that, though, the infrastructure's broken. You've got thousands of people who are still displaced. You've got thousands of people wanting to return home to Syria, but they don't have homes to return to. Yes, there may be some good news in the mix. Some of that remains to be seen. But the need in some ways is greater than ever in Syria.
You're exactly right. I mean, people will have seen the news. Obviously, us along with everybody else, we're praying for peace and that people will be able to return home, that this could be a turning point for Syria. There's a lot of uncertainty there.
Yeah.
I think what people maybe wouldn't realize or maybe forget is that Syria has been one of the worst and most challenging humanitarian crises for well more than a decade.
Yeah.
And World Vision has operated and been there and continued to work there and surrounding areas for the past 14 years. And there's actually almost 17 million people within and outside of Syria who've been displaced, who rely on humanitarian assistance, who are in real need. And while we hope for the best with the future, there's a lot to be set up. There are so many people who are so reliant on assistance, and especially with winter coming, talk about Christmas, talk about that memory connection of Jesus as a refugee finding somewhere to stay. There are so many children and families in that circumstance that need to get through this season while we hope for better in the next season. And so we would love for people to visit worldvision.org.nz. There's we can help to provide emergency food, clothing, basic needs that they are to survive. We've got teams and local partners on the ground that are doing that work already. So one example of how people can be connecting and partnering. And the other way I just definitely want to share as well and not miss it is with the gift catalog.
Yep.
So the gift catalog is just an amazing way where you can go online and look, and there's all these fun and practical and tangible gifts that you can give for not a lot of money that is going to make a real impact in somebody else's life, whether that's $45 to provide clean water or, help support a girl's education for $80, or a really fun one for kids. You can provide a chicken to a family for $12, and that's going to provide eggs. That's going to provide a source of income potentially in the future and nutrition in the short term. So lots of ways people get involved, lots of ways people can give and support.
So much good stuff there, and TJ, really appreciate what World Vision are doing. worldvision.org.nz for these wonderful gifts that will bring smiles to the faces of not only your children but families across the other side of the world, including in Syria. And I think something to note with Syria, Damascus is pretty much walking distance from Nazareth. I mean, that this is the same part of the world that all of these events went down that we're celebrating. So, hey, as we celebrate the birth of our Saviour this Christmas, encouraging you to make charitable giving part of that celebration, worldvision.org.nz. TJ, Merry Christmas. Thanks for joining us.
Merry Christmas to you and all the listeners. Blessings over the holidays, and thank you so much for being a part of what we're doing in the world.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.